I am Dr. Anurag Agarwal, and today we are going to start the chapter The Romantic Age. This chapter is also known as the Age of Wordsworth, the age of the Romantic movement, and the span is 1800 to 1850. And it is generally supposed that the English Romantic movement began in 1798 with the publication of the Lyrical Ballads. Yes, but it is a mistake to assign any definite date to it. It was not a sudden outburst, but it was a result of long and slow and gradual growth and the development. And the poets of this romantic school or movement are Wordsworth, Coleridge, Shelley, Keats, Byron, etc., who were not even the first romantics of England, for the Elizabethan literature is essentially romantic in spirit. This means that this romantic spirit, this romantic fervor we had already seen in the Elizabethan age, and now it is a revival of that age after centuries later. And it is also true that this is also an age which is full of wonder, full of mystery and love for daring adventures, curiosity and even much more, which we try to associate with the poets of the 19th century, and that too the early 19th century. Now, this romantic spirit, students, suffered a total decline, a total eclipse during the Augustan age, or we can also say the pseudo-classical age. And why? Because the Augustan literature was mainly intellectual, it was rational, it was less in emotion, and even there was devoid of imagination, which used to exclusively deal with the artificial life, with the upper strata of the city of London, and the form, the diction, the choice of words which was used, it was also artificial with its theme. And apart from this, a very important thing which every person tries to connect is to connect with nature, which was also devoid. This literature, this period basically confined itself to the narrowness of the fashionable London society, and confined itself to the heroic couplet and to the utter disregard of the music, of the melody, of the lot of ancient English meters. And so we say that this romantic movement, which started with the publication of Lyrical Ballads, was basically a reaction against the dry intellectuality, the dry rationality, and the artificiality of the Augustan period of the pseudo-classical authors. So, there was a term, students, that is pre-romantics, which we have already done in our last lecture, and there we can also say it is also known as return to nature. And return to nature actually played a very prominent part in reviving the romantic era, in reviving the romanticism, because we were very much suffocated and crammed and crowded with the city atmosphere, and people now basically longed and thronged for the freshness of nature, for the vitality of nature, and they wanted to return to again to that free environment, that green nature of the world of leaves, of the world of flowers, of the world of fragrance, of the world of hills, valleys and cuckoos. And it was a poem known as The Seasons by James Thomson, where nature could be seen for the first time. And this is considered to be the first important poem where we saw nature, instead of being subordinate to man, is made the essential theme. And this seed, which was sown by Thomson, grew and grew and flourished more in poetry with the authors like Gray, Collins, Burns, Cowper, and crab. And apart from this, mysticism entered into our era. That is, William Blake introduced the romantic note of mysticism, which was considered something great. And the Middle Ages, which is essentially romantic, it was full of color, pictorial quality, magic, supernaturalism, mystery, love, adventure, and so many things. And Bishop Percy's Reliques of the Ancient English Poetry, which was published in 1765, fired the imagination of the people and attained a lot of popularity. Then we found Chatterton's Rowley poems, then James Macpherson's Oceanic poems, and then comes the lyrical ballads with Wordsworth and Coleridge. And yes, we say emphatically that a long step was taken in the history of Romantic revival, in the history of Romanticism, which was taken by the publication of this great work, mammoth work, beautiful work, Lyrical Ballads. Wordsworth and Coleridge, two loving friends, two great friends, emphasized basically the aims and objectives of this new poetry. And they basically enunciated the theory of the poetic diction and gave a great consciousness and the purpose to the movement. And in this way, they opened a new chapter in the history of English Romanticism. Now, students, a very important thing which to be discussed, which sometimes students forget, and that is the French and the German influence. What is this French and German influence? Here we can say that no account of the development of English Romanticism can be considered complete without mentioning the impact on it of the French Revolution and the German idealistic philosophy. Especially the French Revolution and the writings of the makers of the revolution instilled in them, fired the imagination of the English romantics. ये फर्क पड़ा है कि फ्रेंच रेवोल्यूशन से इंग्लिश रोमांटिक्स का जो दिमाग था, जो इमेजिनेशन था, वो फायर हो गया. And we found a reawakening of the love of the real blended with nature and the love for the simple humanity. And there was no such thing before this revolution. But now, students, it acquired a darshanik, a philosophic basis and attained fresh zeal, fresh stimulus. And this return to nature and the democratic spirit was nurtured, was fostered by this revolution. And also gave a great strengthening effect on the revolutionary idealism of the poets like P.B. Shelley and even Lord Byron. Now, coming to the details of the Romantic movement, we go to the next generation of the Romantics. Till now, we were talking about the pre-Romantics. The second generation poets are Keats, Shelley, Byron, who belong to the second generation. The first generation were Wordsworth, Coleridge, and they actually belong to the place, to the era after 1815, by which date the elder romantics had already given their best, which they had given to us, while the elder generation poets had attained all the respect, all the awe and all the respectability and the social acceptance. The poets of the second generation remained outcast till the very end. And their name, fame and glamour grew only after their death. They could be recognized only after their death. And all these three were rejected by the society, and this rejection caused them a lot of sorrow, a lot of sufferings, and there are those who attribute their early deaths to this fact. John Keats, was ultimately a great poet who undoubtedly and undisputedly great that level of poetry in the field of Romanticism which no one could even do till date. And he has represented a unique balance of classicism and romanticism, a beautiful blending of the classic with the romantic, highly sensuous, highly imaginative, highly emotional, were the perfection of Keats's poems. Apart from this, the exquisite melody, the music of the romantics is also combined with a well chiseled and a very high expression of the classics. Now students, we will also come to define what is romanticism, what is romantic poetry, and unless and until we will not go into the details of the characteristics of the romantic revival of the romantic movement, our postgraduate students, our graduate students, our students of IAS, PCS mains will not be able to give their up to the mark answer in their answer papers in the examination. And I am sure once you will complete these lectures, you will feel so nurtured, so nourished by the knowledge which you are attaining. So coming to Romanticism, which has already been defined by various writers in the entire world, and you will not believe that 10,000 definitions have been in the collection till date. So there cannot be any one definition where we can bank upon. Suppose we talk about पेटर ने रोमांटिसिज्म को डिफाइन किया है एन एडिशन ऑफ स्ट्रेंजनेस टू ब्यूटी. एडिशन ऑफ स्ट्रेंजनेस टू ब्यूटी इज सेड बाय पेटर. एंड एबरक्रॉम्बे का आपने नाम सुना होगा. He also has written somewhere that romanticism is a withdrawal from the outer experience to concentrate upon the inner experience. This definition is by Abercrombie. इसी तरीके से लेग्वी एंड कज़ामिया, both great names in the field of English literature, they have emphasized both the emotional and the imaginative aspects of romanticism. और क्या कहा है उन्होंने स्टूडेंट्स, कोट अनकोट में, एन accentuated predominance of emotional life provoked and directed by the exercise of the imaginative vision, quote unquote. So there are many definitions which may be partially satisfactory, partially unsatisfactory, and there have been lot of composite views. So therefore we can say that we have to just consider the silent features of the early romantic poetry without wasting our time in only defining the romanticism definition. Because once you understand the features of the romantic poetry, automatically the students get a proper idea how to define romanticism. The first and the foremost characteristic of the romantic poetry is its subjectivity. Now you will question, sir, what is subjectivity? So I can say that subjectivity is an expression, whatever is your inner urge, and the inner urge of the soul of the artist, and where the poet or the self does not care for any rules, for any regulations, but tries to give free expression to his emotions. And this emphasis is laid on inspiration, is laid on intuition, and rather than observations of any set ideas or set rules. And the poet writes according to his own fancy, according to his own temperament, and romantic poetry is undoubtedly fanciful. It is introspective also. and it has been criticized as very wild, very irregular. And why it will not be irregular and wild? Because it is coming directly from the heart. It is not taking your mind. You are not calculating anything. And because the poet is free to write on any theme, any form. So what happens? There is an immense variety in the romantic poetry, which any other poetry would not be able to give that level of variety. The second point which comes important in the characteristic is spontaneity. Spontaneity मतलब होता है बच्चों कि हमने सोचा कोई चीज़ और वो तुरंत से हमने बोल दिया, without applying our senses, means कि आपके दिल में जो सोचा वो हमने बोल दिया. That is called the Wordsworth's spontaneous overflow of powerful fashions, जिसके लिए Wordsworth जाना जाता है. And the romantic poet is gifted with, any romantic poet is gifted with that strong, quote unquote, organic sensibility, where he feels more than there is to feel and sees more than there is to see. वो फील भी ज़्यादा करता है और देखता भी ज़्यादा है अपने सेंसेस से. अगर कोई ऑर्डिनरी सब्जेक्ट भी है, ऑर्डिनरी ऑब्जेक्ट भी है, तो वो भी चीज़ें रोमांटिक पोएट को, उसके इमेजिनेशन को एक्साइट कर देती है और उसके पैशंस को पावरफुल बना देती है, which is penned down in the poetry, and that is the regard, the level of romantic poetry, that it is the free flow of the emotions which come on the paper. और जब मूड अच्छा है, मूड खुश है, so he starts singing without any hesitation. And poetry for a romantic poet is nothing but a excited imagination with powerful feelings, and it is not crafted, it is not drafted, but he also does not care for the perfection or even for the clarity of expression.